My name is Natalie Pierce. I'm 34 years old. At 6:48 on the evening of October 12th, I stood under the burgundy awning of Marchand's on West Lexington Street, holding a bakery box tied with silver ribbon, while my husband sat 12 feet away behind tinted glass and raised a champagne flute to his secretary. Not to me, not to our anniversary, to her. Her name was Elise Warner. She was 27. Wore a cream satin dress that looked expensive in the way borrowed confidence always does, and had one hand resting on my husband's wrist, like she had practiced looking natural there. Daniel was laughing at something she said. Real laughter. The kind that tipped his head back and softened the corners of his eyes. The kind I had not heard across our own dinner table in almost a year. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I already knew who it was before I looked. Daniel. Sorry, Nat. Still buried at the office. Systems issue. Don't wait up. I'll make it up to you this weekend. I read the message twice. Then I looked through the restaurant window again. A waiter set a small birthday cake in front of Elise. One candle. Gold lettering. Daniel leaned close and said something that made her cover her mouth with both hands. I did not cry. I did not walk inside. I did not throw the bakery box against the glass. I just stood there with the rain touching the toes of my black heels and counted 7 seconds. What they didn't know was that I had already received the video. Not a blurry phone recording. Not gossip. Not a jealous wife's imagination. A security clip from Daniel's own office lobby, time-stamped 4:52 that afternoon, showing him leaving with Elise through the back entrance, his hand at the small of her back, carrying the gift bag he had told me was a client folder. And the manager of Marchand's was a woman who had been my college roommate. This is that story. Before I tell you how a private dining room full of executives went silent over one video, tell me where you are watching or listening from, and what time it is there. I always wonder who hears these stories late at night, while the house is quiet and the truth finally has room to breathe. And if you connect with stories about women who were betrayed, underestimated, and quietly took their power back, like and subscribe to Ultimate Revenge. Because some women do not need to raise their voices to be heard. Daniel and I lived in Fairmont Ridge, Connecticut, in a gray colonial on Alderbrook Lane, with black shutters, a white porch swing, and a maple tree that dropped red leaves across the driveway every October, like it was trying to warn me. We had been married 9 years. Not 9 terrible years. That would have made the ending easier to explain. There had been good years. Real ones. Daniel proposed to me on the old footbridge behind Millstone Park in a light snow, with shaking hands and a sapphire ring that had belonged to his grandmother. He was 30 then, ambitious but still kind, a junior partner at Halden & Pierce, the commercial property firm his father had helped build. I was 25 and working as an events coordinator for a nonprofit arts foundation. I believed in place cards, handwritten thank you notes, and the quiet dignity of showing up when it mattered. Daniel used to show up. He brought soup when I had the flu. He wrote small notes on grocery receipts. He remembered how I took my coffee. He used to touch the small of my back in crowded rooms, not to steer me but to say I was there with him, not beside him like furniture. By our 4th anniversary, he had made senior partner. By our 6th, he had started saying things like, "You wouldn't understand the pressure," and "I need the house to feel peaceful when I come home." By our 8th, peace meant I stopped asking questions. The hierarchy around Daniel had always been clear. His father, Walter Pierce, was the old lion of the family, retired but still treated like his approval was printed on legal paper. His mother, Mary Ann, collected grievances the way other women collected china. Daniel's younger brother, Adam, was the charming failure who borrowed money and forgot shame existed. And Daniel was the golden son. The responsible one. The one everyone protected, because his success made the Pierce family look polished from the outside. My role was softer. I was the wife who remembered birthdays. The daughter-in-law who hosted Christmas Eve. The one who knew Walter liked his roast beef rare but not bloody. Mary Ann preferred ivory candles over white, and Adam's children needed separate dessert plates because Caleb hated blueberries, and Sophie had decided, at age 6, that whipped cream was, quote, too loud. I kept the family calendar. I wrapped gifts. I sent flowers when Walter's golf partner died. I made sure Daniel's suits were pressed before board dinners. I tracked the nonprofit donations that made his firm look generous. I smoothed the edges of his life so he could be sharp in public. For years, I mistook being useful for being loved. There was one object from the beginning that I carried through all of it. A small silver camcorder my father gave me when I graduated from college. It was old even then, heavier than it needed to be, with a black wrist strap and a tiny scratch near the lens. My father had been a wedding videographer in Providence before he died, and he believed cameras were honest in a way people often were not. "Don't record everything," he told me when he handed it to me. "Just record what people will try to rewrite later." I used it for anniversaries, birthdays, charity galas, Daniel's first company award, the Christmas Eve when Marianne actually complimented my table setting, and the morning Daniel and I painted our first dining room blue and got more paint on our jeans than on the wall. When my father died, the camcorder became less of a gadget and more of a little silver witness. Daniel used to love that about me. Then he started resenting it. "Natalie," he said one Thanksgiving, his voice low as I filmed his mother bringing out the pie, "not everything has to be documented." I lowered the camera. Marianne smiled without warmth and said, "Some women need proof they were part of the room." Daniel laughed. It was small, barely anything, the kind of insult you swallow, because challenging it would make dinner uncomfortable and somehow make you the problem. That was the first example I should have remembered. The second happened 2 years later, at Holden and Pierce's winter client reception at the Carrington Hotel. I had organized the entire evening without pay because Daniel said the firm's regular planner had dropped the ball. I handled the florist, the string quartet, the place cards, the menu substitutions, the valet confirmations, and a last-minute seating disaster when 2 rival developers were assigned the same table. At 9:20 that night, Walter raised his glass and said, to Daniel, who pulled off another flawless evening. Everyone clapped. Daniel stood beside me. He did not correct him. Afterward in the coat check hallway, I said quietly, "You could have mentioned I helped." Daniel adjusted his cufflinks in the mirror and said, "It's business, Nat. Don't be delicate." The third was last spring, when Elise Warner was hired. She came from a boutique marketing agency in Stamford, with glossy hair, sharp nails, and a way of saying Daniel thinks that made his name sound like property. Her official title was executive assistant to the senior partners, but within 3 months, she was only really assisting Daniel. She had opinions on his schedule, his lunches, his suits, his LinkedIn profile, and eventually his wife. The first time I met her was at a Sunday brunch at the Pierce house. Marianne had invited her because Daniel says she's practically indispensable. Elise arrived wearing pale pink, carrying a bottle of wine that cost more than the shoes she pretended not to notice on my feet. "Oh," she said when Daniel introduced me. "You're Natalie." I smiled. "I am." She tilted her head. "Daniel says you're amazing with domestic details." The table went quiet for maybe 2 seconds. Marianne lifted her mimosa. Daniel looked at his phone. I said, "I've always believed details reveal character." Elise blinked. Walter chuckled into his napkin. That was the first time I saw Daniel look annoyed at me for not being smaller. After Elise arrived, Daniel's habits changed with the subtle arrogance of a man who believes his wife has stopped looking. His phone turned face down. His gym sessions multiplied. He bought new cologne, one with cedar and pepper notes that lingered in the downstairs bathroom after he left. He became careful with his laptop. He took calls in the garage. He used phrases he had never used before, like brand optics and executive presence, phrases Elise used constantly in the firm's social captions. When I asked if everything was all right, he smiled without meeting my eyes. "You're overthinking again, Nat." That became his favorite phrase. I was overthinking when he forgot dinner plans. I was overthinking when Elise called him at 10:15 on a Saturday night. I was overthinking when his shirt came home smelling faintly of a floral perfume I did not own. I was overthinking when Marianne began saying, "A successful man needs a wife who understands sacrifice." For our 9th anniversary, I decided not to overthink. I made a reservation at Marchand's 6 weeks in advance. Marchand's was where Daniel had taken me the night we signed the closing papers on our house. It had velvet chairs, brass lamps, framed black and white photographs of old Hartford streets, and a private dining room behind frosted glass, where men in expensive jackets made deals over burgundy and rare steak. The dining room smelled like butter, wine reduction, and polished wood. I chose 7:30 in the evening, because Daniel hated eating too early. I ordered the same small almond cake from Bellamy Bakery that we had at our wedding. Not the whole wedding cake, just a small version, with white buttercream and sugared violets. I asked them to write 9 years in silver. 3 days before our anniversary, I put the reservation card on Daniel's dresser. He looked at it while knotting his tie. "Marchand's?" he said, "if you still like it." He smiled, but not all the way. "Of course I do." I watched him place the card beside his watch. 7:30, I said. I saw it. On the morning of October 12th, rain pressed silver lines against the bedroom windows. I woke before Daniel and ironed the navy dress he used to say, made my eyes look darker. I made coffee. I set his in the black travel mug he liked. The house smelled like toast and wet leaves. At 7:10, Daniel came downstairs in a charcoal suit, typing on his phone. "Big day?" I asked. "Always." I waited. He kissed my cheek without stopping. "See you tonight?" I said. He paused by the front door, just long enough that I felt something in my chest tighten. "Tonight?" "Our anniversary dinner." His eyebrows lifted, then settled too quickly. "Right, of course, Marchand's." "At 7:30. "Yes, I know." He walked back, kissed my forehead, and said, "Happy anniversary, Nat." It was the kind of kiss a person gives a receipt before throwing it away. At noon, flowers arrived. For one bright second, I thought they were from Daniel. They were from my best friend, Claire Whitcomb, who lived 2 towns over in West Haven and had known me since sophomore year of college. The card read, "9 years is not nothing. Neither are you." I set the flowers in a blue glass vase on the kitchen table. At 3:25, Daniel texted, "Day is getting ugly. Might be tight tonight." I looked at the message while standing in Bellamy Bakery, waiting for the woman behind the counter to tie silver ribbon around the cake box. I typed, "Should I move the reservation?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "No, I'll make it work." That was the thing about lies. They often wore the same clothes as reassurance. At 5:38, I was upstairs fastening my earrings when my phone rang. It was Claire. "Before I say this," she said, "are you sitting down?" I looked at myself in the mirror. Navy dress, pearl earrings, hair pinned softly at the nape of my neck. A woman prepared to be chosen. "No," I said, "but say it." "I just left my office," Claire said, "and I passed Holden and Pierce's back lot." Claire worked in the legal building next door to Daniel's firm. I gripped the edge of the dresser. "What did you see?" I saw Daniel. The room changed temperature. "With Elise?" Claire breathed once. "Yes." I did not speak. "They got into the Blacktown car from the firm account," she said. "He was carrying a gift bag, silver, with a gold ribbon." My eyes moved to Daniel's dresser. The Marchand's reservation card was gone. "What time?" I asked. "Around 4:50. "Are you sure?" "Natalie." That one word did not pity me. It steadied me. I looked at the old silver camcorder on the bookshelf where it sat beside a framed photograph of my father. "Did you record it?" I asked. There was a pause. "No," Claire said, "but the lobby cameras would have caught the back entrance. My associate's husband works building security. I can ask if there was a way to confirm they left. I'm not saying he can just hand over footage. But if there's a lawful reason—" "There is," I said. My voice sounded calm enough to belong to someone else. At 6:02, Daniel texted, "Systems issue. Still at office. I'm so sorry." At 6:19, Claire sent me one sentence. "Check your email." I sat at the kitchen table beneath the flowers she had sent me and opened my laptop. There was an email from Claire with a forwarded message attached from the building's contracted security vendor. The clip had been shared with Claire's firm because there had been an ongoing internal inquiry about improper use of the shared executive entrance after hours. It was not obtained for me. It was not stolen. It was part of a report legally circulated to her office because the back lobby served both firms. I clicked play. The footage was silent. Daniel and Elise entered the frame at 4:52 in the afternoon. She wore the cream satin dress under a beige trench coat. Daniel held the silver gift bag. They walked close enough that their shoulders brushed. At the door, Elise turned her ankle slightly on the threshold. Daniel caught her by the waist. She laughed. He did not step back. Then he kissed her. Not long. Long enough. The timestamp sat in the corner, indifferent and perfect. I watched it once. Then I saved it to a folder named October. I printed the email header. I forwarded a copy to my personal attorney, Mara Callahan, who had handled the small inheritance from my father and once told me, after reviewing Daniel's prenuptial agreement, "I hope you never need me for this marriage, but if you do, document before you decide." At 6:36, I picked up the cake box. At 6:48, I saw him through the glass. That was the breaking point, not the kiss, not even the lie. It was the birthday candle. It was watching him celebrate her on the night he had promised to honor us. It was seeing the reservation I made turned into a stage for his deceit. Inside Marchand's, Elise lifted her glass and said something I could not hear. Daniel touched her hand. Around them sat 6 people I recognized from the firm. 2 junior partners, a client from Bridgewater Development, Daniel's brother Adam, grinning like he had been invited into the joke, and Walter Pierce at the head of the private dining table, lifting his glass toward Elise like she had earned a place I had cooked and cleaned and smiled my way around for years. Marianne was not there. That almost made it worse. This was not an accident, it was an introduction. My phone buzzed again. "Daniel, I hate missing tonight. You know that, right?" I looked through the window at his hand on Elise's chair. I did not answer. I watched his thumb move across his glass. I counted 5 seconds. Then I understood something I should have understood years earlier. They were not careless because they thought I would never find out. They were careless because they believed finding out would not change anything. I turned away from the window and walked 2 doors down, under the awning of a closed stationery shop. The rain tapped against the bakery box. My hands were dry. My breathing was even. I called Marchand's. "Marchand's, this is Tessa," said the hostess. "Tessa, this is Natalie Pierce. I have a reservation at 7:30 tonight, but I need to speak to Maribel if she's available." There was a pause. 1 moment. Maribel Santos came on the line, 30 seconds later. "Natalie?" Her voice held surprise, then concern. Maribel had been my roommate junior year at Fairfield University. She now managed private events at Marchand's, where the owner trusted her with clients who thought money made them discreet. "Are you outside?" she asked. "Yes." I saw the name Pierce on the private room booking, but I thought. "So did I said. The line went quiet. "What do you need?" I looked back at the restaurant window. Daniel laughed again. "Is there a screen in the private dining room tonight?" "Yes, they requested it for a presentation." "Who booked the room?" "Halden and Pierce." "Under Daniel's name?" Another silence. "Yes." I closed my eyes. "Maribel, I have a video that directly concerns the man currently lying to me by text while using the anniversary reservation I made as a birthday dinner for his secretary. I need to send it to you." "Natalie, I am not asking you to do anything illegal. I know you're not. I am asking whether the private room screen is connected to the event manager's tablet. It is. And whether a video can be played if the person who booked the room requested audiovisual access. It can. I don't want a scene," I said. "I want the truth to enter the room without me." Maribel exhaled softly. "Send it to my personal email." At 6:58, I sent the clip. At 7:04, Maribel texted me, "Stay close, but out of sight. Give me 10 minutes." I did not go home. I walked to the public parking garage across the street, sat inside my car on the 3rd level, and placed the bakery box on the passenger seat. My hands smelled faintly of sugar and rain. I opened the glove compartment and took out the small silver camcorder. I had put it there months earlier, after recording a charity auction, and never brought it back inside. My father's voice came back to me so clearly it almost hurt. "Just record what people will try to rewrite later." So I did. I positioned the camcorder on the dashboard, aimed toward Marchand's front entrance and the side window of the private dining room. From that angle, I could see shadows behind the frosted glass, shapes moving, waiters crossing, the glow of the screen when it turned on. At 7:12, Daniel texted again. "Still here. This is brutal. Rain check tomorrow?" I stared at the words. Then, for the first time that night, I replied, "Of course." 2 words. No punctuation. At 7:15, Maribel called. "Daniel asked for the screen to show a birthday slideshow," she said quietly. I looked across the street. "For Elise?" "Yes." I almost smiled, not because it was funny, because arrogance is often generous with evidence. "What happens next?" I asked. I told them the file was loading. "The room is full. Walter is making a toast." I could hear muffled restaurant noise behind her, silverware, low voices, a door opening and closing. "Natalie," Maribel said, "are you sure?" I looked at the bakery box beside me. 9 years and silver icing. "No," I said, "but the truth is." At 7:17, the screen in the private room went blue. From the garage, I could see the shift in light through the frosted glass. The shadows at the table turned toward it. I imagined Daniel smiling. I imagined Elise leaning forward, ready to watch photographs of herself in restaurants, at firm events, maybe in Daniel's office pretending surprise at being valued. But that was not what played. What played first was the silent security footage of Daniel and Elise leaving the office at 4:52. Then the timestamp. Then Daniel catching her at the door. Then the kiss. The room did not explode. It emptied itself of excuses. Even through the glass and rain, I saw the stillness. One shadow stood too quickly. Another remained seated. A waiter stopped outside the room with a tray in his hands. The blue light of the screen flickered across the frosted panel like a heartbeat. My phone rang. "Daniel." I let it ring. He called again. Then Adam called. Then Daniel again. At 7:19, a text appeared from Daniel. "Where are you?" I looked at the cake box. At 7:20, Elise came out of the private room first. I saw her through the restaurant entrance, one hand pressed to her chest. Walter Pierce behind her, with his face set in hard lines. Daniel followed seconds later, phone to his ear, scanning the sidewalk like a man looking for the fire he started. I stayed in the car. I watched. I recorded. Daniel stepped under the awning and called me again. This time I answered. "Natalie," he said, breathless. "Where are you?" "In the city." "What did you do?" I looked at the camcorder screen. His face was small but clear. "I sent the restaurant one video." His voice dropped. "You humiliated me in front of my father." "No," I said. "The video did that." He lowered his head, turned away from the door, and spoke through his teeth. "You need to come here right now and fix this." That was the sentence that ended my marriage, not because it was cruel, because it was familiar. He had lied, he had cheated. He had turned our anniversary into another woman's birthday celebration. And still, in his mind, I was the person responsible for making the room comfortable again. I did not answer immediately. Rain moved in thin lines across the windshield. Then I said, "Daniel, who booked the private dining room?" He was silent. "Who used our anniversary restaurant for Elise's birthday?" "Natalie, this is not the time." "It seems to be exactly the time." "You don't understand what you just affected." "I understand perfectly." "You could damage the firm." "Then you should have been more careful with firm property, firm transportation, and a shared security entrance." Silence. There it was. The first sound of him realizing I knew more than he had prepared to deny. At 7:23, Walter came under the awning and held out his hand for Daniel's phone. Daniel shook his head. Walter took it anyway. "Natalie," he said, in the voice he used when he wanted servants to move faster without being called servants. "Walter, this has gone far enough. It went far enough at 4:52 this afternoon. You embarrassed the family." I looked at the old camcorder. Red light blinking. "No, Walter. I documented what the family did. You always were dramatic." I almost laughed, but I did not give him that. "Then you should be relieved I stayed in the parking garage." Walter's breathing changed. "You're making a mistake." "No," I said. "I made those for 9 years. Tonight I made a record." Then I ended the call. By the following Monday, I had retained Mara Callahan for a formal separation, not a divorce yet. Not because I was uncertain, but because Mara believed in sequencing. Emotion makes announcements. She told me in her Hartford office at 8:30 in the morning, sliding a yellow legal pad toward herself. Proof makes outcomes. Her office smelled like paper, lemon tea, and old wood. On the wall behind her desk was a framed print of a lighthouse in fog. Mara was 51, silver-haired, precise, and allergic to melodrama. I placed everything on her desk: the email header, the security clip, Daniel's texts, screenshots of his claims that he was at the office, the receipt from Marchand's showing Halden and Pierce had paid the deposit for the private dining room using the firm account, a photograph Maribel sent of the requested birthday slideshow file name, Elise Birthday Final. Mara reviewed each document without changing expression. When she reached the Marchand's invoice, she paused. This was billed to the firm? Yes. For a private birthday dinner? Yes. On your anniversary? Yes. She looked over her glasses. Natalie. I know. No, she said gently. I don't think you do yet. She tapped the invoice. This is not only infidelity. This may be misuse of corporate funds, depending on the partnership agreement. And if he represented his location to you while using company assets for a personal relationship with a subordinate, there may be employment liability. I folded my hands in my lap. I don't want to destroy anyone. I know, Mara said. That is why we are going to let documents speak in the rooms where they belong. 3 weeks later, on the first Thursday in November, Daniel moved into the guest suite temporarily, which meant he wanted the appearance of stability without the inconvenience of accountability. He came and went quietly at first. Then he began to test the walls. At 7:40 one evening, he stood in the kitchen while I labeled containers of soup for the freezer. My mother thinks you should consider counseling before making this public. I placed a lid on the chicken barley. Your mother was not in the marriage. She's in the family. So was I. He looked down. Are you really going to punish me for one mistake? I wiped the counter with a white cloth. One mistake does not require a birthday slideshow. His jaw tightened. You don't know what it was. I know what it was not, I said. It was not our anniversary dinner. He stared at me for a long moment, waiting for tears, anger, pleading. I gave him clean counters and silence. By then, I had learned that silence made dishonest people reckless. They heard it as weakness. They began filling it with their own mistakes. Daniel's first was texting me a paragraph at 11:12 on a rainy Tuesday night. You don't want discovery, Natalie. Trust me. You've lived well because of me. Don't make this ugly, or you'll regret what comes out. I forwarded it to Mara. His second was letting Elise send me a message from a number I did not recognize. I'm sorry you found out the way you did, but Daniel has been unhappy for years. Maybe ask yourself why he needed someone who actually understands his life. I saved it. His third was allowing Adam to call me after 2 drinks and say, You know, Dad thinks there are ways to challenge the house if you get greedy. That was when I pulled the property file. I did not call Daniel, I called the county recorder. At 9:10 the next morning, I drove to the Fairmont County Records Office on Bristol Street. The building had beige tile floors, fluorescent lights, and a clerk named Mrs. Vasquez, who wore red glasses on a chain. I requested the deed history for our house on Alderbrook Lane. Daniel had told everyone for years that he bought that house. He had not. We bought it together. The down payment included $86,000 from my father's life insurance policy, money I had contributed because Daniel's bonus was delayed, and he, quote, didn't want the seller to get nervous. At the time, he said the title structure was just paperwork, and that his attorney had handled it properly. I had believed him. Mrs. Vasquez printed the recorded deed. My name was there. Natalie Ann Pierce. Joint tenant with right of survivorship. My hands did not shake. Then she printed the mortgage satisfaction documents and the home equity line of credit Daniel had opened 3 years earlier. That was when I saw a signature that looked like mine but was not mine. The loan amount was $240,000. I stared at the page until the fluorescent lights hummed louder. Mrs. Vasquez looked at my face and said quietly, Do you need a copy of that? Yes, I said. Certified, please. By the following Monday, Mara had referred me to a forensic document examiner named Elliot Greer, who worked out of a narrow office above a pharmacy in New Britain. He was 70, wore suspenders, and handled paper like it could bruise. He compared the signature on the home equity line to my driver's license, my passport application, my mortgage closing documents, and 3 handwritten anniversary cards I had given Daniel over the years. At 11:45, he looked up and said, "This is a simulation." I sat very still. Meaning? Someone copied the general shape of your signature, but missed pressure patterns, spacing, and terminal strokes. It is not yours. The room seemed to narrow around the table. "Can you put that in a report?" "I can," he said, "and I can testify." I went home that afternoon and stood in the dining room Daniel and I had painted blue years earlier. The maple leaves outside scraped softly against the window. On the sideboard sat the old silver camcorder. I thought about my father, the life insurance money. The way Daniel had let people believe every stable thing around us came from him. I did not argue with my mother-in-law. I printed the statement. I did not warn Daniel. I made 3 copies. I built it in silence. 2 days before Thanksgiving, Natalie Pierce came to the house carrying a pumpkin pie and judgment. She set the pie on my kitchen island like an offering to peace she did not intend to make. "Natalie," she said, removing her leather gloves finger by finger, "you have had your moment." I poured tea into a white cup. My moment? The restaurant. The video. The embarrassment. I placed the kettle back on the stove. "Daniel's embarrassment." She smiled tightly. "You know how men can be when they feel neglected." I looked at her. It would have been easy to answer. To ask if neglect was now measured by almond cake and anniversary reservations. To ask if she had taught Daniel that betrayal became less ugly when blamed on a wife's housekeeping. Instead, I opened the drawer beside the stove and took out a folder. "What is that?" she asked. "Paper." Her mouth flattened. "Don't be clever with me." "I'm not." She stepped closer. "This family has been very good to you." I slid one document slightly out of the folder, just enough for her to see the words, "Home equity line of credit." Her eyes moved down, then up. "What is that?" "A question," I said. She did not touch it. For the first time since I had known her, Natalie Pierce left my kitchen without finishing her tea. I need to pause here for a second. If you have ever been the person everyone expected to stay quiet because the truth would inconvenience the family, then you know exactly what that kitchen felt like. It was not about one dinner or one lie. It was about the years they spent counting on my silence to keep their version of the family clean. If this story is hitting close to home, leave a comment and tell me what moment made you stop explaining yourself. And if you have not already, subscribe to Ultimate Revenge. The quiet part is over. The public payoff did not happen at Marchand's. That was only the first crack in the glass. The real room was the conference room at Halden and Pierce on December 7th at 10:30 in the morning. Long walnut table. Frosted office doors. A wall of framed development awards. Coffee in silver carafes. 12 people present, including Walter, Daniel, 2 other senior partners, their outside employment counsel, the firm's accountant, Elise Warner, Mara Callahan, and me. The meeting had been called because Daniel wanted to, quote, resolve domestic interference affecting firm reputation. That was the phrase in the email, domestic interference. Mara read it aloud in her office and said, "Wonderful. They have named the door we are walking through." I wore a charcoal dress, pearl earrings, and the sapphire ring Daniel's grandmother had given him to give to me, not because I wanted the marriage back, because I wanted every person in that room to remember what promises looked like before men started calling them inconvenient. Daniel sat across from me. He looked tired but polished. Elise sat 2 chairs away from him, wearing a gray blazer and a necklace with a tiny gold E at her throat. She did not look at me. Walter opened the meeting. "We are here," he said, "because private matters were brought into a professional setting in a way that has harmed this firm." Mara clicked her pen once. I folded my hands. Daniel leaned forward. "Natalie, before this goes further, I want to say I'm willing to be generous. But the public accusations need to stop." Mara glanced at me, then at him. What public accusations? Daniel's mouth tightened. The video. The video was factual, Mara said. It showed what occurred. Elise shifted in her chair. Walter said, Miss Callahan, we are not here to debate morality. No, Mara said. We are here to discuss risk. The outside counsel, a man named Philip Lorne, adjusted his glasses. What risk specifically? Mara opened a navy folder. The sound was soft. Still, everyone seemed to hear it. First, she said, the October 12th use of firm funds for a private birthday event for Ms. Warner, booked under Mr. Pierce's authority and attended by clients and partners under questionable pretenses. Daniel said, it was a client relationship dinner. Mara slid a copy of the invoice across the table. Then perhaps someone can explain why the internal event file was titled Elise Birthday Final. No one spoke. The firm accountant reached for the page, then stopped himself until Walter nodded. Mara removed a second document. Second, the use of firm transportation for a personal outing with a subordinate during business hours, while Mr. Pierce represented in writing to his spouse that he was handling a systems issue at the office. Daniel laughed once, sharp and humorless. My texts to my wife are not firm business. No, Mara said, but the car service invoice is. She slid it across. The accountant's face changed. Then Mara placed a still image from the security footage on the table. Daniel and Elise at the back entrance. Timestamp visible, his hand at her waist. Elise whispered, "Oh my God." Daniel looked at her, then at me. I did not look away. Walter's voice lowered. This meeting is becoming inappropriate. Mara nodded. Agreed. So let's move to the matter that required Mrs. Pierce's presence. She opened a second folder. Thicker, cream-colored. Certified copies clipped together. Daniel's eyes flicked to it. He knew. Not everything, but enough to understand the ground had shifted. Mara said, 3 years ago, a $240,000 home equity line of credit was opened against the Alderbrook Lane property, jointly owned by Daniel and Natalie Pierce. Philip Lorne sat straighter. Walter looked at Daniel. Daniel said, that has nothing to do with the firm. Mara turned one page. It does if proceeds were transferred through an account connected to Pierce Holdings LLC and later used to cover a shortfall in a firm-adjacent development investment. The room went silent. Not quiet, silent. The kind of silence that made the hum of the lights seem rude. Daniel's face went pale from the mouth outward. Walter said, Daniel? Mara slid the signature page to the center of the table. This is the authorization document. The signature purports to be Natalie Pierce's. Philip Lorne reached for it. Mara placed another document beside it. This is a preliminary report from Elliot Greer, certified forensic document examiner, concluding that Mrs. Pierce's signature was simulated. Elise's chair made a small sound against the floor. I remembered the line from The Style of My Life up to that point. A fork hitting china, a lawyer closing a folder, a villain smiling too early. Daniel was not smiling now. Mara looked at him. Mr. Pierce, when exactly did Natalie sign this authorization? Daniel swallowed. I would need to review records. You told the lender she signed it at home on April 14th, 3 years ago, at 8:15 in the evening, Mara said. We have the notary log. I turned my head slightly. That was my one sentence. Daniel, where was I on April 14th at 8:15 in the evening? He stared at me. Nobody else knew the answer yet. Mara did. I had given her the video. The old silver camcorder had recorded a charity gala that night for the women's shelter in New Haven. I was on stage at 8:15, introducing the keynote speaker, 42 miles away from our kitchen table, wearing a green dress and Daniel's grandmother's sapphire ring. Mara connected her laptop to the conference room screen. Not dramatically, not angrily, just efficiently. The screen lit up. There I was, 3 years younger, standing at a podium beneath a banner that read Haven House Spring Benefit. My voice filled the room. Good evening, everyone. My name is Natalie Pierce, and on behalf of the board, thank you for being here. Mara paused the video. The timestamp from the camcorder sat in the lower corner. April 14th, 8:15 in the evening. She turned back to Daniel. That is not my client's copy, Mara said. That is the original file. No one moved. Then Philip Lorne asked the only question that mattered. "Daniel, who was present when that loan document was signed?" Daniel opened his mouth, closed it. Walter's hand gripped the edge of the table. Elise whispered, "Daniel?" That whisper did what my anger never could have done. It made him look smaller. The unraveling was not loud. It was worse than loud. It was procedural. The accountant asked for transfer records. Philip Lorne requested an immediate recess. Walter demanded Daniel speak privately. Mara refused to allow me to leave the room alone with anyone from the Pierce family. Elise began crying silently into a paper napkin, but no one comforted her. Not because they were cruel, because her tears had arrived after the documents. Daniel looked at me once across the table. His eyes asked for the woman who used to rescue him from discomfort. I gave him nothing but truth. At 11:22, the meeting adjourned. At 11:40, Mara and I walked out through the glass lobby of Halden and Pierce. Rain had turned to sleet outside, tapping against the windows with tiny hard sounds. Daniel followed us to the elevators. "Natalie." Mara stopped but did not turn. I did. He looked older than he had at 10:30. "We need to talk," he said. We did. "Not like this." I looked at the office behind him, the partners, doors, the receptionist pretending not to listen. Walter standing at the conference room entrance with his arms at his sides, as if power had become too heavy to hold. Daniel lowered his voice. "You don't understand what happens if this gets reported." "I do. I could lose everything." I thought of the anniversary cake sitting untouched in my freezer at home, 9 years in silver icing, hardened now beneath plastic wrap. "You should have considered that before you borrowed my name." His mouth tightened. "I never meant for you to be hurt." That was almost funny. Not because it was untrue. Because men like Daniel often believed harm only counted when they meant it. As if carelessness was innocent. As if betrayal became softer because it was convenient. I pressed the elevator button. The doors opened. Before I stepped inside, I said, "You did not forget our anniversary, Daniel. You remembered it clearly enough to use the reservation." Then I left him there. The consequences came in layers. First, Halden and Pierce placed Daniel on administrative leave. The official statement said it was pending an internal review of financial irregularities and workplace conduct concerns. It did not mention Elise by name, but by the following Friday, she had resigned. Her LinkedIn profile changed twice in 1 week, then disappeared. Second, the lender froze the home equity account once Mara submitted the forensic report and proof of my whereabouts. The matter was referred for investigation. I will not pretend that every legal consequence was immediate or cinematic. Real accountability is slower than people think. It arrives in letters, deadlines, affidavits, and uncomfortable meetings under fluorescent lights. Third, I filed for divorce. Daniel tried apology first. He left a voicemail at 9:06 on a Sunday morning. "Nat, I know I handled things badly. I was under pressure. Elise made me feel seen. But it wasn't real. I understand that now. Please don't let lawyers turn this into something uglier than it has to be." I saved the voicemail. Then he tried blame. "You shut me out emotionally," he wrote in an email copied to no one, which was his first mistake. "You made everything about being perfect." I forwarded it to Mara. Then he tried nostalgia. He mailed me a photograph from our honeymoon in Maine, the two of us standing near the water, hair blown sideways by wind. On the back, he wrote, "We were good once." I looked at the photo for a long time. Then I placed it in the silver camcorder bag with the old tapes. Not because I wanted to preserve him, but because I refused to let him own the memory alone. Marianne came by once more. She did not bring pie. She stood on the porch at 4:30 in the afternoon, while the maple tree shed the last of its leaves. I opened the door but did not invite her in. Her lipstick was perfect. Her eyes were not. "This has devastated Walter," she said. "I imagine it has." "Danielle made mistakes." "Yes." "Must you be so cold?" I looked past her at the porch swing. Danielle and I had painted white the first summer we moved in. "I was warm for 9 years," I said. "You called it useful." She flinched. For a moment I thought she might say something real, something human, something like, "I saw what he did and I am sorry I helped make him believe he could." Instead, she pulled her coat tighter and said, "Families should handle things privately." I nodded. That is how families become crime scenes with curtains. She left without another word. The divorce took 8 months. The house remained mine under temporary order because the forged loan and my contribution to the down payment complicated Daniel's claim. Eventually, through settlement, I kept Alderbrook Lane. Daniel kept a smaller investment account, and his grandmother's sapphire ring returned to his family, which I agreed to only after Mara made sure my father's $86,000 was credited properly in the property division. People asked if giving back the ring hurt. It did, but not in the way they expected. The ring had belonged to a woman who raised Walter Pierce, who raised Daniel Pierce, who believed women were foundations, not owners. I no longer wanted a symbol from a family that mistook silence for consent. The old silver camcorder stayed with me. On the first cool evening of October the following year, almost 1 year after the dinner at Marchand's, I took it out to the porch and recorded the maple tree. The leaves were red again. The porch swing moved slightly in the wind. Inside the house, soup simmered on the stove, and the dining room walls were no longer blue. I had painted them a soft cream that caught morning light beautifully. Claire came over with 2 cups of coffee and a bakery box from Bellamy. "Tell me that is not almond cake," I said. She smiled. "It is lemon tart. We are evolving." We sat on the porch while dusk settled over Alderbrook Lane. "Do you miss him?" she asked. I thought about lying because healing has a way of making people expect clean answers. "Yes," I said. "Sometimes I miss who I was when I believed him." Claire nodded. That was friendship. Not fixing, not judging, just sitting beside the truth until it stopped feeling so sharp. A month later, I began working with Haven House again, this time helping women organize documents before they left dangerous or financially controlling marriages. Not because I had become some fearless symbol. I had not. I still checked locks twice. I still woke some nights remembering the restaurant window. I still felt my stomach tighten when a man said, "You're overthinking." But I had learned something I wish every woman learned before she needed it. Proof is not bitterness. Records are not revenge. Documentation is not drama. Sometimes a screenshot is a boundary. Sometimes a receipt is a witness. Sometimes a video is the only honest person in the room. Daniel eventually took a position with a smaller firm in another state. Walter retired fully. Adam stopped calling. Elise, according to someone who told Claire, who told me without being asked, moved to Boston and started using her middle name professionally. I did not celebrate any of it. The final gift of the truth was not watching them fall. It was realizing I no longer had to hold them up. On what would have been our 10th anniversary, I opened the freezer and found the cake box still tucked behind a bag of frozen blueberries. The silver ribbon had stiffened. The icing had cracked. 9 years sat there in dull metallic letters, preserved by cold but no longer edible. I carried it outside. Not dramatically, not with music, just me, in a sweater, standing beside the trash bin under a pale morning sky. Then I stopped. I took the ribbon off first. I kept that. I do not know why. Maybe because not everything tied to a painful memory has to be thrown away. Maybe because silver can still shine after being wrapped around the wrong thing. I threw away the cake. Then I went inside, made coffee, and placed the silver ribbon in the drawer beside my father's camcorder. Now when people ask what happened to my marriage, I do not say my husband cheated with his secretary. That is only the headline. I say my husband forgot that quiet women still have eyes. He forgot that loyalty is not blindness. He forgot that a wife who remembers every detail might also remember where every document is kept. He forgot our anniversary to celebrate another woman. So I sent the restaurant one video. And after that, I let every room tell the truth for me. Thank you for staying with me through this story. I know some parts may have felt familiar to those who have been told they were too sensitive, too suspicious, too dramatic, or too difficult, simply because they noticed what others wanted hidden. If this reached you, I hope you remember that peace does not always begin with forgiveness. Sometimes it begins with a folder, a timestamp, and the decision to stop protecting someone else's lie. Subscribe to Ultimate Revenge for more stories about quiet women, family betrayal, silent comebacks, and the kind of strength that does not need to shout. So tell me, if someone used your silence as permission to betray you, Would you confront them in the moment? Or would you let the proof speak when everyone was watching?